Welcome back to the War Room. We have a special episode today as we roll into a little series we're doing with some college coaches about the recruiting landscape in America today. The NCAA is all over the place. We don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully these guys do. Kicking things off here with Austin Cousino, recruiting coordinator at the University of Kentucky. Austin, I'm going to dive in real quick because I don't know if many people know this, but SEC Freshman of the Year 2012, third round draft pick out of Kentucky. You're at your home right now, Big Blue Nation. Give me on the spot UK national champion basketball this year, yes or no?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've seen them enough. I've gone to every home game, so I'm all in. Yes.
One win over Duke, and they're already flying flags there in Lexington. But seriously, when I was diving in to check out on you, and so many of the coaches that we come into contact to, and I'm sure most of your recruits and the families you're talking to, they don't know much about your playing days and all the other coaches' playing days. You come in SEC Freshman of the Year in 2012. As a guy who was coaching at that time, those bats were so dead. Those balls were so dead. You literally, I was like, oh, he played 12, 13, 14. Literally the deadest bat era where outfielders were playing at 10U depth. What was that like?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I feel like anytime, we watch highlights now in the offices, and it's like, I can't believe that it actually looks like we were playing in the 1940s based off these TV productions. The dead ball era was awesome being outfielder because the balls would just hang up there forever. We used to joke on our team, we're like, no, you don't want to hit the ball out of the stadium. You want to land it in front of the outfielders. So seriously, because it was so hard to get the ball in the air. You're like, oh, just pull it. If you can't pull the ball in the air, you don't want to hit it in the outfield.
And for those who don't know, and players, I mean, shoot, this was, sorry to date you. I'm even older. So I'm dating us so much. There was an era where you went to TD Ameritrade, and if one home run was hit at Omaha, I was like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Because the bats were that bad.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even 10 years ago, right? Our guys now, they're bigger, stronger, faster. Say what you want about the bats and balls, but back then you would see guys leave, and it's they went to pro ball, and it's oh my gosh, they're hitting more homers and throwing harder. And you're like, yes, because we were using I call them, the balls were cinder blocks, and the bats were 2x4s.
I can still vividly remember, because I'm sure at UK too, the wind blows in when it's cold. On those days, the outfield was very close to the infield. It was ridiculous. So anyway, as a hitter for you, it pumps up your stats, which are outstanding anyway. SEC freshman year. Me as a pitcher, I always look at my numbers, and any kid who pitched in that era is hey, you add 2-3 to your ERA. If you were pitching at 12, 13, 14, juice it up.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, you go on, you play, but then you come back, and where we first met when you were at Mississippi State, did such a great job. You actually, I think you were the guy who sealed the deal on my brother heading to Mississippi State. You did such a great job. My dad still talks about the visit that he had there with you. Mississippi State to Xavier with Billy O'Connor does such a great job there. Then you go into with the Tigers into scouting, and now home at UK. Talk to me about that journey, but more so about how you developed as an evaluator at each stop. You're at Mississippi State, you go to Xavier, you're looking at all these different players, and then you go into the pro ball. How have you changed? What are things that you've learned about the evaluation process?
Yeah, so really fortunate to get back when I got done playing pro ball with an amazing group of guys at Mississippi State, Gary Henderson, Jake Gautreaux, Mike Brown. I mean, can't imagine a better group of three guys in a program with such great history to start my coaching career, right? So at that point, right, you're getting out of playing and you just want to conquer it all, right? I'm 24, turning 25. I'm really close to the guys, right? Being a grad assistant, and everything's important and it's my way, but you get a chance to step back and really learn from, as you know, amazing baseball minds, right? And so from that that year, amazing Omaha run, end up losing to the eventual national champs in Oregon State, finishing third, was awesome. Amazing experience. And at that point I was like, man, I want to become an actual coach. I want to be a grad assistant. So Billy O'Connor, one of my closest friends now, my first job as a volunteer assistant, had a staff there with, Matt Rada. Nick Audie was there. You've got, John Delora at TCU now, just really good baseball people. And so Billy really was probably the most instrumental at that point in my life because of the evaluation. We need to get good players, right? You need to be calling kids and knowing these travel orgs and let's get on prep baseball and watch hitters go through every state. Where are they committed? What's a good player look like? What do you like? What you don't like? Johnny leaves for TCU. He bumps me up. And then I'm getting okay, there's guys we come in at Mississippi State. And you're starting that Rolodex of players in the process, where they're going and how they're doing. Spent a year there and got back into scouting. Taylor Black, who's now at Florida as the assistant, played in Kentucky before me.
It's a small world.
It is so small. He calls me. He's like, hey, you want to scout? And I'm like, no, not really. I'm good. I got a good deal here. He's like, well, I was kind of the same way. But, I hear him out and I'm like, man, this could be pretty cool, right? From a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, evaluating, going back to elite talent. Because I wasn't super drawn into professional baseball, just kind of how my experience, as you know, right, kind of finished. But then when I thought about more, I'm like, man, this might be just really cool, another chance to learn. So I did the 3 years with Detroit, COVID draft, and then so went from 40 to 5 back to 20 rounds, and just learned a ton about how to break a ball player down. And really what I learned there is what can a guy do? What will he be? And you're just taking this really holistic approach of everything, paying attention to player comps and how their body moves and timing and rhythm and barrel path and all these things. And that's really where I gravitated towards that piece. And spent 3 years with Detroit, was fortunate enough to draft Dylan Dingler in 2020, made his debut this year, a couple guys in AA. Yeah. So it was really cool. It was really cool to see with Detroit, and James Orr he's a cross checker now with the Diamondbacks, was really instrumental in my development. But, did that for 3 and then one quick stint with Tampa Bay before coming here. And so it's almost I don't want to say real life transfer portal. I've been really fortunate to have amazing people where I just poured in, they poured in me, and they really just kind of let me go and reeled me back at times when I maybe went too far or thought I knew too much. Or run my mouth a little bit too much, right? I think they all could give you stories of that. But really just each stop, I felt I was just trying to be really good there and just try to help other team win or beat the other teams in scouting, or how can I, go see more players. I think just each stop was really unique to what data, numbers, and technology kind of helped me and just shaped me to this job where it's all coming full circle.
Now, look, talk about a little more of the evaluation. So even more so the pro side where you were going out for the Tigers, we're looking at, hey, what can this kid be? And I think about it all the time from a college coach's perspective, especially when a guy blows up after 3 and 4 years. Tarek Skubal, just named Cy Young. Hey, if this guy's not good in this 3-year window for us in Lexington or us here at Xavier, it doesn't matter what he does 6 years from now. How did this guy not get recruited by big schools? Well, in this little window, he wasn't there. How does that change your evaluation for, hey, I think this guy in 5 years may be really good versus hey, this dude right now, we can go get him and he can help us on the field in Lexington? Yeah,
no, that's a really good question. When I think of guys, like you said, whether it be Skubal or everyone's path is so different, right? I talk about development. It just isn't linear, right? And, guys commit at different times, and whether it's, Power 5 or not P3 now or transfer portal or junior college or D3 or D2, you can pull so many different examples of these, maybe case by case, just, when guys got better and how they worked. But the cool thing for me is realizing that you just have to keep turning over these stones. And I'm a big proponent of success leaves clues, right? Mm-hmm. And you're trying, that's what I learned with the draft, right? Guy like Skubal, and you hear these stories of okay, he was hurt and, he had this representation and this facility, or even just guys from, who went into pro ball and did poorly or good, and you're like going back on your own evaluation of what you saw. And I think sometimes you can kind of skew it. I think the cool thing now that you're seeing, Shooter, is whether it be like transfer portal or all these different things, is like there's not one way to success. In different environments and cultures can like cultivate that. We just try to be really diligent and thorough on like what we believe works. And talking, like I said, for us personally, like our whole staff and like what's important to us and what we believe is going to win here and work here and find the field here with how we play and what do we want our players to believe in and what's important. But I do think it's like a little bit like case by case, and you're like, okay, like I can see why he was good because of this reasons. Okay, I can see why it didn't work out because of that. Really, like I said, that's what like I love, just to like reassess your process of that.
For sure, and you guys have done such a great job, Minge and the rest of the staff. In that evaluation process, you got a tough team. You have to go out. Now, you guys have gone in the transfer portal and built a really good culture, bringing in a bunch of guys. But you have set a really good foundation of freshmen coming onto campus, developing them. How do you balance, especially being in the SEC, where, hey, if we don't win this year, everybody's perpetually in the hot seat. That's what it feels like in the SEC. If you don't win, how do you balance needing to win with also wanting to develop, because you guys have had guys develop and have some big draft picks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's a fine line, right? Like of, making sure you bring in the right guys from high school, bringing in the right guys from the transfer portal, making sure that, when you speak about culture and what Coach Minge has preached here and, what we really emphasize of just, the family aspect of like, okay, you're coming here because of the things that he has really established are important. Right. And what is important in his life with faith, family, and baseball. And really you're going after those guys that are like-minded. Right. And that doesn't matter where they come from. This past year we had high school, junior college, and we had a Division III commit. The junior college and D3 commits got drafted. Right. Like they never showed up. But look, we're going to find ways to acquire the right person and player through like all means necessary. For us, it is, like the high school ranks, they've been amazing for us, right? To get guys like Emilian Petre or Mason Moore, Travis Smith, right? The transfer portal, right? Like I believe we are one of the top schools of transfer portal draft picks of anyone in the nation, right? And so for us to make sure we're having a healthy balance, like 6 of our 9 hitters last year were returners in our program with 5 high school and 4 transfer portal. I think it's super important to make sure that when you go through this process, I spoke to another coach in our league and there was another regional team this past summer and we talked for at length at area code games. And he point blank said, he's like, man, like we're trying to, when we played you guys, like, I just love this about it and that. And we're going back and forth about like our teams and what we liked and didn't like. And he's like, he said something like, no, like, I really like what you guys are doing there. Right. And it's cool to like bounce some things that you like know work. Cause no one knows like what's going on really behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But like, if you're not gonna, like you said, like this win now mindset, it's almost like for me, like I don't really think in that sense of like, okay, we have to win. I just want to think like, okay, if I believe we're getting the right person and player because of like the evaluation of their tools and their makeup and competitiveness and like the depth chart and what they can bring early and what scouts have said, what you guys, going to all these events and putting things on, like that's where I'm like, hey, this guy can come in and like I can see 30 to 50 or 70 at bats. I can see like another jump. Like let's go send him off to this summer ball and see. And from there, like we can build the roster by not just saying like let's just throw. Like the days of throwing stuff against the wall and getting like just like that's what we have a pitcher on our team. He's like 5'6" lefty, right? Like super low release height. We're like, man, like something different. Like we're building the team based off like each player we've evaluated. And in the end, we believe in our development, our culture that we're going to win based off that.
And you want to foster that talent, and you talk about just how much work goes into that. And you've had all these stints where you've, hey, I picked up this from Billy, I picked this from Gary, got this from Brownie, whatever it may be from the Tigers. I was always told like so much of the work as a coach is done off the field, especially as a college coach. And it's one of the big things is like good players make you a good coach, right? Like it's no, you're not really faking the funk. Like, hey, we got good players. And how do you get those good players? You're doing a ton of work, I imagine, in your offices. You guys are constantly talking about recruiting, and you talk about having that plan. how far in advance are you building that plan? Is it like in 4-year structures? Hey, this guy will be a senior here. We have a freshman there. We're identifying this talent. How long are you guys, or how much do you talk recruiting? Is it a constant thing that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we really, for me, right, like that is 90% of my job. Like you said, like looking at the team, building out the team, the depth chart, and really for the way I do it, right, like you're keeping track of each class, what you need in that class, and you have to work ahead, kind of like what you said. And the rules have changed, like the early recruiting, which has been really cool, and that doesn't put it like it doesn't make it less important. I think that's the big thing that we've talked about before. It's like, okay, like how are we going to adjust? Like we still need to keep tabs on these guys, even right, like going into high school from freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, because the evaluation process never stops. And I think you know that, right? So the more eyes and looks and evaluations we can get through the big thing, like I said, it starts with Twitter, right? It starts with like baseball tournaments. It starts with this like boots on the ground with each state. Like having a relationship with you guys when you go to futures games, when you go to, Lake Point, when I go to Grand Park, right? Like the evaluation of like, I see this guy, I like him. I can't recruit him yet, but like, we're going to stay in touch with him through camps, through their summer orgs, right? Because we can't actually recruit them. So the time we do get the skill instruction, when they come see our facility, they meet our coaching staff, they meet our players, they get to come through and see everything about the city when they come to Lexington. We have put such an emphasis on like, okay, this is where he's at right now. And based off of all of those pieces, like, okay, maybe when August 1st and September 1st comes around, right? Like we can have a better idea of like where they may fall really. Like, so
and I find it so important. It's like, I always talk to our guys internally and try not to sound like a used car salesman. Like, hey, I do think this is super valuable. Hey, especially right now for our 2027, right? Those sophomores, hey, these guys can't talk to you right now, but they're doing their homework. And tell me, like, I know the way that I go about going into the tournament. It's easier to know what you're going to look at. I do a ton of prep before I'm going to an event or before I'm going to Lake Point, right? You guys lose in Omaha. Hey, who do I need to go see? Those are the phone calls that I'm handling. How much preparation are you doing beforehand? I mean, talk about the 27s and even going to the 28s right now. Like you can have contact with them, but does that mean you're not paying attention at all?
No, 100% paying attention. And I'll even, like you said, to give them a tidbit on like the 27, 28, I'll revert back to our 26s because that was really like the first true class, as you know, where the new rules came place. And those guys got 14 months to work and develop, 15 months before even having communication. Those guys were getting recruited. And so I'll say this, 8 of our 9 commits in our 26 class came to a camp, right? And so I encourage like those guys, it's like, no, you need to do like the preseason ID. Because when January hits, I have reminders on my calendar of every Midwest state. I'm like, I will be watching the Twitter account. I will see the swing. I will see the velo. I will see your operation. You're going in an Excel file. I'm writing a follow. And I'm essentially like, I know like what I just saw from the video. Like I may call the state director. I may call, the org. And like, I want to know about the kid. Like, where's he playing? What's important to him? Those things are like crucial for now talking about the 27s and 28s to like, you don't need to go to every single thing, as you know, right? Like you're not going to change your numbers or your video like in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. But like there's a time of like, all right, I'm going to go somewhere and then like I'm going to work for a couple months and then I'm going to see it pay off.
It's like I always find it's super important to me. Like, hey, I'm doing a national stuff, right? We're putting together these big national rankings. I constantly want to be the most knowledgeable so that when you call me or somebody else, any other school calls, I can give you an answer right away, or I can give it to you in one call. I always think that the winter events are incredibly vital, and you come out of your off season, you're showing off what you have. Because for you, March 1, you may decide, hey, I need to go up to Illinois to see this arm because that's how good he is. We need to start getting evaluations today because we can't just wait till August 1 and then, hey, buddy, what's going on? And start talking because this school is going to be offering him. That school will have seen him 5 times. They've been here. Is that something that's important to you for a kid to, hey, show off your advancements in the winter so that I know I need to see you in the spring or the summer?
100%, right? And I think that's where we lose this evaluation time of the recruiting calendar, which we hit on a little bit, which if it were up to me.
Let workers work.
If it were up to me, Shooter, we would just blow it all open 365 days. Like, let us go out and see the kids more. But unfortunately, right, we've made the window shorter, right? And that's why it's so important, as you know, is like those months from, the middle of October through March, like there's a lot of work. Like you can change a lot with your body and your physicality and your mental skills. Like your kids are going to grow. Like I told you, like it's not linear. So that like if I see you in March, and then the other thing is like from March until August.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's another period there where like I have to see you so many times so that like when I see you in August, like then I have an idea of when we can start recruiting you of like what you are based off of what you were before and what we believe you will be in the long run. It's just crucial. Like it really is.
And it's so tough. Talking with families so many times, right? Hey, you get on the radar. You just talked about it, whether it's social media, you're talking to our scouting directors, boots on the grounds, getting as much info as you can. And you'll watch it as much because you're going to create that follow list. From that follow list, you're going to want to have eyes on that guy. And the more times you can get eyes on that player, the better it is. And that's the way I look. Is that something that ultimately I'm going to make the decision in person. But for me to come watch you in person, I kind of already need to know about you. Is that where you're at?
100%. And you always, there are times when like you'll show up at the field. Like there's a player in our program right now, a pitcher who like I showed up at the field randomly. I was like, man, that looks like a good arm. Caught like the last 6 pitches of the outing. Like, unfortunately, I'm like, well, I got to see him again. I liked it. Like he's throwing 95 now. Like he's a freshman in our program.
Look at you.
So, like, and then, like there's other, there's obviously like other ways to like see that. But I think it's so important. Like the more times I can see someone, it doesn't mean I'm going to be right in the end. It just gives me more peace of mind that like we've done all the work so that like, okay, here's what I can go to your profile and see what it looked like. Here's the progression. And so when it's all said and done, I have such a better conversation with Coach Mingione about like, and this is like why we need this guy, because I saw him here. I saw him there. Like he's gotten this much better. Or on the flip, as you know, like man, like, this guy hasn't progressed maybe like how we thought. And even if that's the case, like it doesn't stop there. It's not like, okay, he's not good enough. It's not right now. And I think that's what I would tell like the younger guys is like, it's awesome that we, they've slowed it down so they can just go play and be kids and have fun. And they're going to the facilities and doing all these events so that like when the time comes, like they're ready when the eyes are on them. The other thing is it's like, even if it's not now, like you just have to keep playing and keep working, right? Like there's no end game to it. And I know that's the big thing that I've had with some of these travel works here in the Midwest of just like, man, like what should these guys do? It's like, put your head down and work. Like what else can you do?
Yeah. It's you got to always be getting better. And like, especially in the SEC, which is an absolute gauntlet, shoot, AA at some points is easier than SEC baseball at this point. But to go out there and you talked about, those young guys, and I'm always, especially for these uncommitted guys, the 27s, especially right now, the road to the future games, right? That's the one-stop shop, a place where you may roll up. Hey, I'm watching the state of Kentucky. All of a sudden, hey, I just caught this arm from this other place. And I always, most fresh in my mind and most vivid is being with Minge up in the tower when Caden Dana, who's a New Jersey product, right-hander, 22 class, committed to you guys. But like Jersey kid, Minge was pretty fresh then, really clean arm, super young, but being able to project that. Now he ended up signing for I think 1.6. It was the biggest contract after the 10th round at the time. Made his big league debut this past year, which is remarkable in the 2019 future games. But his ability to see those guys early, envision what he's going to become, that seems to me like, hey, you've watched so much of right now a freshman at 28. I know what a good one looks like. What does he look like as a 27? I want to follow that to the next year. Is he making that progression? And you guys do such a good job. Is that because, hey, we're watching, you talked about it earlier, you're watching so much video. Get on Prep Baseball. I'm going to watch video during this dead period because I want to know what it looks like next to our guys.
Yeah, 100%, right? And the big thing I'm doing this time, even working reverse, like I'm watching our players in our program. Like, what did you look like as a sophomore or a freshman? And like a fifth year guy, it's funny. Our guys are like, we'll go back, and a guy in our program last year, Ryan Nicholson, we go watch his high school video. I'm like, we're laughing. There's 6 guys in the office and we're chopping up and we're just pulling up old Futures Games videos. And we're like, dude, this is hilarious. I would have never recruited that. And it kind of goes back to what you said of guys got to get better. But the cool thing, like I said, with like what you guys have done with the video and the data and the numbers and just like making sure we get the right guys, you guys get the right guys at the events, so that like truly like we have to track like players' progression, right? So like whether, like I said, for the 27s and 28s, like, you know, whether it's going picking a handful of camps to do, whether it's you have to, like I said, you got to get out, because if I see a name on Twitter, like I got to go to Prep Baseball and look them up, because I know I'm going to get all like the landmarks of their metrics and like every event they've been to and all the things they've done, because I need to go back and like watch and see, okay, like this is what it looked like. And guys can change, like you're changing swings, you're changing deliveries. And, you know, the most important part is, like you said, the more eyes, the more evaluations I can get. It's like scouting. Like the more you see someone, the better confidence level you have of like what it'll be. And so that's what we're doing. Like I said, this winter, it's like, no, we're going to go back and like, we're going to start gathering names and lists, and we're going to get our follows. But like, I'm going to go back and go look at, I was watching Seaver King from high school yesterday. Yeah. Like I was on Seaver King's Twitter, and I'm like, he was at some U.S. Nationals showcase, like, or U.S. Elite. And I'm like, yeah, that looks like a pretty good bat. You know, I think a lot of guys missed on Seaver King out of high school. It's, you know, but
you talk about Petrie, who was another future gamer, but like different regions look differently, right? You're from the Midwest, you're from Ohio, you've done the scouting in that area, you've gone down to Mississippi, you've seen Florida products. Like this guy looks different. At the same time, Matt Shaw in New England and Dylan Cruz look different when they're 15, but both end up being first rounders. They're both going to be big time big leaguers moving forward, but it's something you do have to predict. And even more importantly, as we move closer to this 34-man roster that's going to be implemented, which is, you know, scaring the recruiting world, but it's also going to force you to hone in on, like, I have to be confident in my evaluations. And how do I get that confidence? I see the guy, I mitigate the risk, I get more comfort in knowing what he will be. And that's got to be something for you where, hey, I got to get on the road, which is why you're probably going to get on the soapbox here and say, make it 365, but you got to mitigate the risk.
100%, right? Like that's really, and I think that's what this 34 is, right? Like you have, you know, whoever's evaluating the talent, right? Like you have the recruiting process of like showing him your school and what's important and what your program's about. And every program's different, right? And you hit on that, right? Like, but the other piece is like the true evaluation of the player, right? In these days of like overcommitting and like all of it, I think that's the tough piece now is like you really have to, like, it's almost like you're a GM, like you're building a team, right? And you can't, like I said before, it's like you can't just throw things at the wall and it's expected to stick, right? And I wish we could evaluate more and go to camps and get to know these players, but we just can't within the rules. But so it makes that look, like you talked about, like that one look has to be like so important, where I've got the spring stats, I've got the summer stats, I know the org, I know the guys who really like him and don't like him, and he's come to camp and done all these different things, so that like when it comes to the decision time, like you said, like we're really, like I said, mitigating the risk of the player. And every, like I said, the case by case is different. But that's like the fun thing, because it's like you're kind of playing like it's just a crystal ball, like.
It really is. And I'll go to bat. And if right now anybody who's listening to this on the site at this point will be an article I put out called The State of Recruiting, which things are going to change. There's 34-man rosters. Guys are going to have to start looking at their rosters a little bit differently. It will move, and you can say this if you want, closer to a football model where, hey, those commitments, they're more soft commits. There will be continued recruitment of those players because, again, coaches are making seven figures at the top programs, and they are not making it to lose. Boosters, alumni, athletic departments, athletic directors, they're not there to build a 10-year, hey, we have a rebuild project. No, we just, coaches don't have that time. So along the same lines, you kind of have to evaluate yourself as a player is what I would ask you about, because there are some kids, and I don't like using, hey, this kid got axed, he got cut. It may be beneficial for the kid in the long run. Hey, this is just not the fit. We made a mistake, which, hey, all coaches, evaluators, human, it's an imperfect science. To do it prior to, hey, you spent 2 years here, it was never going to work out. that's too long now versus, hey, we need to do this now a little bit earlier because it's no hard feelings. And I'm going to defense for you guys as coaches where hey, it's not a hard feelings situation. It's, hey, we know now this is not going to work out. It's better to rip the Band-Aid off than to have you come in and then have to do this at the break or after your freshman year. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, no, I think it really just goes back to being as honest and upfront with families and players, recruits, and guys, even within your team, right? Like you don't have to. I think there's a fine line. Like you don't have to like it. Like it's very like said again. It's very like a prideful thing to have these conversations. Like I said, even within your pros, you know this, right? Like it's the reality of life, right? Like if you don't perform, and let's not act like we still aren't impacting and influencing like 18 to 23-year-olds now. You know, like I think you can't get lost of like the importance of like what we do of like teaching life through baseball and like teaching them to challenging them and impacting them at a time when like they leave home and they leave their parents and they have a ton. Right. Like, as you know, now, like these guys have way more distractions than any other college kid group of human existence has ever had. So like, we never can lose sight of that. And I think, like I said, we do such a good job of like making sure like what Coach Min just done is like, we're going to make sure like their voices are heard. We're going to take care of them. And like, you know, like tough conversations are going to happen. Like they have to respect our background and what we believe is best for the program. But we can't lose sight of really, like said, like why we're doing what we're doing. Because if you're just in it for the wins, like if you're just in it to like for yourself, it just doesn't really make it purposeful, right? Like I think for me, like coming back here, kind of full circle of what you said is like, I don't want to be wrong in my evaluation. I don't want to have to sit there and have a conversation with someone that's like, no, like that was my fault because I thought that you could do X, Y, and Z, and maybe it didn't progress at the rate. And that's not easy to have the conversation and admit that you're right or admit that you're wrong, right? Like I think we all want to say when we're right. But I think the big thing is just when you're just honest and upfront, I think that's what really like all people want. And I think that's where like I said, with going to the 34, it makes it tougher. And, you know, I know, like I said, Coach Mingione, like when we talk about bringing players in this program, like it's thorough and diligent, like everyone on our staff talks to them, right? Like they don't have to all see them, but we have to have an understanding of like when they step on campus, like this is how this guy is going to help us, right? Based off of, like said, the speed, the defense, the run, right? Like who he's played with and against in different events. And when we've watched him, like this is what you can expect. Because if he isn't that, right? Like not only can he not show up, but like then now like the margin of error has just gotten thinner.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's where it's like, you know, ultimately like everyone wants to play. Like why would anyone want to go anywhere and sit? But I think like you said, from that standpoint, especially in our league, getting a bad rap of just like, no, like, this is what we believe. You don't have to agree with it, but you have to be honest and do it in the right way that you know, like, okay, like at least they can respect it, right? Like that's all I ask, you know, is like, can you be upfront about it, you know?
Absolutely. Well, Kuz, I really appreciate you coming on. Some awesome knowledge dropped from a former SEC freshman of the year, 3rd round draft pick, making sure to pump my guy up. He's not just the recruiter extraordinaire that he's become now at Big Blue Nation. Guy bleeds blue. Also gave a guarantee that Kentucky's going to win the national title this year. For basketball, we'll see. Return trip to Omaha. I'm sure they're looking forward to that in the spring. I'll be following along. Kuz, thanks again for coming on. And until next time, this has been The War Room.